BJ the Brave here. We are live with another Warhammer 40k Warpforge meta report. Now guys, we're about a week into the new patch. It's December 2023 and I really wanted to just get something out there to kind of like, it's early days, yeah, but let's just get a bit of an understanding of kind of like what's being played, what's working well so far on ladder, and where each of the factions are at. So I wanted to get this out to you guys. I've had a lot of people asking me to just have a bit of discussion on the meta, so hopefully this is going to be helpful. Before we dive in, I just want to say a massive thanks to everybody who supported the channel. I've had tons of encouragement, loads of positive comments, and a load of you have subscribed as well. So a massive thank you to everyone who's done that. Currently, I'm trying to reach a goal of 500 subscribers. So if you are someone who watches some of the content but hasn't yet subscribed, just do me a massive favor if you will and hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. Right, let's dive into it. So very quick recap. The format that we're going with in the meta report is that first of all, we are breaking each of the top decks that have been played into a kind of S to C tier. So S tier is the top, A tier, B tier, C tier. Quick reminder, it doesn't mean that, for example, something that's B tier can't be an S tier deck. In fact, that's often the case. That's often how this kind of format works. But generally when we talk about something being S tier, it's the best deck because it's not just capable of winning any game, it's got a degree of consistently winning those matchups, so like, or consistently winning across a broad spread of matchups. So it might be weak against a certain B tier deck, for example, could be a counter, but actually across all of the kind of meta decks it does the best, it does well. So that's something you've just got to bear in mind. You know, don't be sort of thrown if you think, well, why does my S tier deck keep losing to this B tier deck, for example. Alright, so that's kind of like the format that we want to use, and yeah, let's dive straight in. So we do have some S tier decks that are emerging, and there's kind of like a couple of versions of the same thing, but ultimately it's Orkz Control that really is, like, I think the S tier at the minute. So there's kind of two versions. There's I'm going to start with the kind of Ghazghkull. So Ghazghkull has many builds at the minute. Ghazghkull can play aggro, he can play like a tempo body build, he can play control, kind of hybrid with mech or not mech. There's kind of quite a lot of ways you can build it out. So by no means the deck I'm going to show you is the only S tier version of what I'm talking about. But I'm going to show you a kind of Imotekh Control. Now this build can basically play like a sort of mid-range deck, but it's got the control elements if it does need to kind of switch between being the beatdown and the control. So this is my build. I'm still playing with certain cards in here, and there's some things that we can do with it. So obviously Ghazghkull got the new his new Warlord talent ability in this patch, and it's made a huge difference to Ghazghkull. Ghazghkull used to be pretty lame, to be honest. He couldn't often do anything on the first turn, and now obviously the fact that he can pump out 2 grots every time there's nothing on the board, it's massive because it just gives you that consistent presence on the board. It also gives you a really powerful opening. So most of you will know now that if you're going second, you can use the orkz stratagem that gives you 2 grots. As long as you use your Warlord talent first, that means you've got 4 bodies on the board turn 1. That is super powerful. Because if your opponent doesn't deal with them, you can then hero power or Warlord talent again the next turn, and they all get buffed, +1 melee and +1 range. So basically Ghazghkull doesn't need to rely on units in the early game anymore. He can just kind of use his Warlord power. And this is why I think the control thing works quite well with him, because you can actually save a few cards like in those first few turns and build up his hand a little bit. And yeah, he's not worried because your opponent's trying to deal with that early tempo. So what have we got in here? So the first thing to note is that there's quite a kind of like mech component to this build. So what do I mean by that? Well, we've got the spanners and the burner boys, so obviously that gives us AoE clear. I actually was playing the grot tanks, but I've dropped them out. I actually don't feel like we need the grot tanks anymore, because the grot tanks used to fill a hole in that they were really good turn 3 drop in the last meta. They stood up well to the marine turn 3, and they stood up well to the necron turn 3. The meta's changed, and because of what we just said about Ghazghkull's Warlord ability, you often don't really need it anymore on turn 3. And so I prefer to kind of have some better, some better tanks, especially now that the tank's got a bit of a buff and the spanner got a buff as well in the balance patch. So to supplement the Burner Boy spanner package, we've got quite a lot of vehicles that can benefit from the spanner buff. Obviously, we've got the double war bikers, we've got the Deathcopters, we've got the Snaz wagons, we've got a killer can, we've got a Death Dread, we've got the 2 squig buggies. So they might be buddies as well, to be honest. And synergizing with that, obviously we play the legendary Mech Boy Gazmech, because he can also act as a support for the Burner Boy, but he can also make a lot of this stuff cheaper. So it's not uncommon, for example, that you might have play Mech Boy down, attack with something, and discount your Killer Can, meaning you can use the Killer Can Tide ability to play out like 2 Killer Cans on turn 8 or 9, depending how cheap, obviously, you make things. So overall, what this deck is really good at doing, it's got a good amount of flanking and kind of removal, so it can kind of keep up with it on the board, and in the late game it can start to put on pressure, even just again from Ghazghkull's Warlord talent, just constantly putting things down on the board. But obviously we've got a few bigger units as well in terms of Ardshell, Death Dread, and finally the Rock Invasion. And again, rather than just playing this out as a kind of tempo build, we've got those control elements in as well. So it plays the Will of Gork. So if it gets behind on the board, no problem, we can just factory reset it with the Will of Gork. Same with things like No Mucking About. Obviously we've got the Scorcher Assault. You could run 2 Scorcher Assaults if you want in this deck, or if you've got the legendary Paramedics, you could run that as well. So there's quite a bit of flex spots. One of the things that is a cool tech in this deck is the Cloud of Smoke. I've run 2 of them. I've run 1, I think. At the minute I'm running with 1, but I think this card is really good in this type of build, because what you generally do is you have one, as long as you have 1 vehicle on the board, that basically means that Cloud of Smoke will blind 2 units. Now obviously one of those can be the enemy Warlord, but you can manipulate the board state that it's essentially giving you what if you think about how powerful Blind was in the Marine meta deck in the last meta with the 1-drop, the Octavia Infiltrators, it's basically the same thing that the Orcs are getting. So Cloud of Smoke is really powerful, and it might even be correct to run 2. So like I said, lots of ways you can kind of like fiddle with these numbers. You can play around with it. You could have less Deathcopters. You could put the Grokk tanks in. Do you run double Death Dread? Do you have none of those? Do you have 2 Killer Cans? You can sort of play around with the balance of those cards, but the kind of core strategy that I just described is how this plays out, and it's just super powerful. It's got good early game, good mid game, and good late game, so very good deck. Now the one thing that you might be noticing that's obviously missing from this is you're like, well, where is the Green Horde, right? That's like the best Orc card, right? And where are the guys that support that, like the Storm Boys and the Slugger Boys? Well, we're not running the Green Horde in this, and that's because what Ghazghkull struggles with is he doesn't have card draw, and so often the Green Horde could be in your hand, but you don't have the boys and you can't draw them, in which case it's a dead card, or the other way around, that you have the boys and you don't have the Green Horde, and you sort of just need to get on and play them out. So it makes it quite clunky running the Green Horde. I'm not sold that it is any good, but some people in the top are running the Green Horde with it. Obviously, if you get it off, it's super powerful. No one's saying it isn't. But it's the consistency that's the problem. If you play 150 games with this deck, you're going to have many of those games where it's just going to be really cloggy. And if you wanted to run the Green Horde, it would look something like this. So you can see in this version we do have obviously the Storm Boys and Slugger Boys, and we have the Green Hordes in. So you can run with this. As I say, it's very powerful when you get it off, but you expect to have some games where your hand is a bit clunky. But overall, that is one of the decks that I think is in the S tier for sure. And the other version, you could almost say, well, this is also Orc Control, but it is face Rippa Control, what I called my Rock Hard Control version. And I have to say, this deck is phenomenal. I mean, I started the season just playing this because it was my favourite deck last season. I made a couple of tweaks, but it's quite old school, and it actually does really well against Ghazghkull. So it's one of my secrets out there. First night I went like 11-1 with this deck and was beating up Ghazghkull, and the main reason for that is, as we just said, that the Green Horde is super powerful. The difference with this deck is that he actually can draw that consistently, and this is where I think Faceriff has a real advantage in the meta at the minute, because people have forgotten. It's like that ability to draw is just insane in a control deck. You can draw the tools that you need to end the game. So this version of the deck can basically outdraw Ghazghkull, and you know, it's got all of the hard removal stuff that we talked about. It's got the great finishes, and it's got 3 powerful waves in terms of, you know, the Green Horde waves and the Rock Invasion. So this deck is super powerful, super S tier right now. It's just brilliant. It's benefited from the Marines being nerfed and that S tier deck going, and it's benefited from Necron Control being weakened slightly as well. So this is a super top tier list. If you want to consider those as the same, because they're all control fine, but I do think they are slightly different playstyles, and I would say that they are my 2 S tier decks. Okay, so moving on to the A tier. So I'm going to start with the Scarabs. Now, this shout out to Aquaman. So King Aquaman, he's basically been #1 on ladder early on with this deck, and yeah, it's very different to my Scarab build. You can go and watch my Tempo Scarab video. I've got that deck is still very powerful and would be up there too. But this is a slightly more what you might call like all-in on the on the Scarabs themselves. My deck kind of had a backup because I didn't like the fact that you could just get AoE'd and lose. But this has kind of gone all in on the Scarabs, and it's been super powerful for Aqua. Like I say, he's like gone stormed up to the top of the ladder with it. And one of the main reasons why this is in my list as an A tier list is because it does so well against orcs. And obviously, right now orcs are the meta, and orcs are going to be, I don't know, 65% of your games that you're going to play. So if you just want to kind of like batter orcs, this is a really good idea. People think of Scarabs like Marmite. They either love or hate them, you know, and that's to play with and play against. So it can get a bit dull and repetitive to play with, but ultimately what you're trying to do is just get Scarabs out on the board. Turn 1, you know, if you go second, you can play a Scarab, you can play the hero power, and you can play the stratagem that you get for going second, which is a 0 cost. So you can basically pump out 4 Scarabs on the very first turn, and with things like the Spider's Nest, which you're mulliganing hard for, and even if you don't get it, obviously Orikan's ability to kind of look at 3 cards and select the one to go top of your deck next turn means that it's not going to be long before you get the nest. So it's pretty consistent. You want to be always having, you know, a full board essentially. So you can imagine if you've got 4 Scarabs out, you play a spell that now gives you 8. You attack with 4. And then play another spell, and it rebuilds the board to 8 again. You just keep doing that on repeat. You can drop things like Chronomancer, so that then when you raise the next 4 Scarabs, they can actually attack enemy troops that turn because they come on with flank. And then you've got things like Self-Destruction for the finisher. So obviously Self-Destruction with 8 Scarabs, I mean that's 24 damage, guys, so it's pretty powerful, and it just wrecks enemy boards and can burn face down as well. So super powerful finisher. Just one quick thing, I have changed one thing about this deck. I've put 1 Triarch Stalker in, and that's only because Aqua plays he doesn't play this. He actually plays the Annihilation command, which is a legendary card, which I don't have, and that's why it's not in this build. But just wanted to make clear that he does not run the Triarch Stalker, he runs the Annihilation command. So if you've got that legendary, put it in. If you haven't got that legendary though, the Triarch Stalker is pretty good. It's a nice little, you know, again, if you've got 8 Scarabs down, 7 Scarabs down, you drop this, they all suddenly get +2 range attack. It's kind of similar, and you get a big body as well to play as well. So, and apparently, I don't know too much about this, but apparently he added Doomstalker because it was a good counter against orcs. So that's something for you all to go and play around with. So that is the Scarabs in A tier. What else have I got in A tier? Well, it's unfortunately back to orcs. Now the next A tier deck for me is the Grukk Aggro deck. So far in terms of orcs, we've talked about control, but actually this aggro is probably the fastest potentially deck in the game, providing that you get the draw. The reason why it's not S tier is because it is a little bit inconsistent. You really want to get the Green Horde early with this deck, so we deliberately don't run lots and lots of troops so that we can make use of Grukks a warlord talent to draw the cards that we need. The idea with this deck is that we are going fast with the green horde and getting bodies down quick and early. We've got things like the pyromaniacs and I thought we had, yeah, we have a Scorcher as well to kind of like help kind of deal with boards early, and that gives us a quick advantage. We put a lot of pressure on any kind of big vanguards like Lich Guards and things like that. We've got no mucking about, so we can zoom straight past them. And as you can see, we literally have one card that's above 4 energy, and that is the Squig Buddy. So Buggy. With things like Proper Killy and Makari, we can, and Warbiker, we've got that reach to kind of end the game quick. I mean, you can win games in turn 5 with this deck. It's insane. It's super fast, and it's a good ladder deck too. If you want to climb quick, it's worth learning this deck and playing with it. Really powerful deck. Just a little bit inconsistent. So we've had Scarabs and we've had Aggro Orcs for A tier. Now, the next one, I was unsure whether to put in A tier or B tier. Wait a minute. I've got, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I went with A tier with this one in the end, and that is Necron Control. So this has been a good deck last season, and it continues to be a good deck this season. It has had a little bit of a hit to it. Few changes. Tomb World now only resurrects 5 instead of 6 units. The Psychomancer is become more of a tempo card than a control card. It still stuns an enemy and you get to choose, and that's on rally. You don't need to play any spells with it, so it's actually a better turn 4 player, but it can't do the I'm going to sit here and keep using spells and keep stunning things, especially like it used to be really good at dealing with stealth units. Can't do that anymore because you can't come on and target the stealth. So it's a nerf in many ways, but it's a little buff in other ways. It's still decent. We run one of them. The Lich Guards got like lost a point of damage, but they're mainly there for the defense, which they still have, so they're fine. So yeah, this deck is really good. What we're trying to do, obviously, with this deck is get into the late game. It's one of the best control decks in the game. Always has been, still is. It's got lots of flankers in the Tomb Blades and the Destroyers, and you obviously can just keep bringing those guys back to life. In the graveyard, you can use Reconstitution you can use Praetorian to kind of raise, sorry, not Praetorian. You can use Technomancer to just raise them and just keep on flanking, keep on attacking. You've got a little bit of heal with a Conquering Tyrant. Some people run 2 of those, but I think one's probably only all that's necessary these days. And then obviously we've got things like the Hex Destroyer combining with the Curse of the Pharaon to do a massive AoE of 4, or you can even go higher than that. On turn 9 you can Scythe Assault, doing 2 to 3 damage, but of course with the curse that's another 3, so you're looking at kind of 5 to 6 damage there. So some massive AoEs in this deck, and you've got some hard removal and the methodical destruction. Some people play the Lord, some people don't. I actually don't have the is it Oberon, the 9-drop legendary, which I think could be pretty good actually right now. I know some of the top players do run that, and I'd be tempted to run that over the Necron Lord if I had that card, but I don't have that card. But yeah, this is a really good deck if you want to slow play and control the board. Then this is a good one. I'm not running it too much this season. It's quite slow. That's one thing I would say. Like just from as a ladder deck, like your games will take twice as long. But that said, it is very powerful. So the next one I think is B tier now. I would love to put it in A tier. There's an argument that it's on the parallel with those decks that I've mentioned in A tier, but I'm gonna put it like top of B tier, I think, and that is what is the Ghaelyn tempo deck. Now I'm gonna show you my deck, which is a little bit different, and I'm still trialing it, but it's a little bit different. And basically what you're gonna see with this is it's the up to kind of like the 5s is kind of the norm. Ghaelyn is the best tempo leader that the aeldari have, essentially, the Eldar have. And not only is he constantly putting out a body on the board, but obviously that body leaves behind a Spirit Stone, which you can then use to cheat out tempo later. So he is the best tempo leader, and to support that we run the full Guardian package. So we've got all of these cheap early Guardians. Guardians are brilliant, guys. They're so good. Like I said, yes, they're fragile, but they do come with a Spirit Stone, and if you do get to attack with them, they all have Shuriken, and the Guardian Defender has Shuriken too. So this guy can do 4 damage for a 1-drop, and then he gives you a Spirit Stone, which you can then cash in to get tempo. So these cards are like S tier. These are like S tier 1-drops in my opinion, and the 2-drop as well. I mean, the extra health is really pivotal. So what you're looking to do is play out your Guardians with the Warlock early game, like by turn sort of 5, 6 if you can. Build a board, use things like Wind Rider and Shroud Runner to counter, you know, anything that your opponent plays where you need some removal, and that's kind of like the early game, and that level of tempo can basically keep up with anything in the game, to be honest. It used to out tempo the Ultramarines S tier in the last meta, so it's very, very powerful. The only downside is you've just got to draw it, right? So you've got to make sure that you are mulliganing correctly with this deck. Right, so some people run 3-drops like Scorpions and Warp Spider. I actually dropped them in my version, but you can go ahead and run 1 or 2 of those if you like. The Eldritch Storm is obviously one of the best AoEs, single card AoEs in the game, and the Banshees are excellent as well, tempo cards, sort of tempo control, and we then get into our Fireheart, which is one of the really top legendaries, along with the Scorpion Exarch. Often you can combine those two because you can drop the Exarch in stealth, and then the next turn when he's about to attack, you bring Fireheart on and basically make this guy immune, so he could take something out really big, or he can hit face and he doesn't take any damage. So that's pretty nice. The Spirit Seers and the Vengeful Wraithbones are both 5 energy, and these guys are the ones who are cashing in on those early Spirit Stones because they provide a massive tempo swing. Now here's where my deck gets different. What a lot of people do is they do play the Wailing Doom, they play things like the Hemlock, or they play things like Banshee Mask. They've got more early game, like I said, they have Scorpions or Warp Spiders. What I found is that I not only was running out of cards, but running out of reach, actually, when I didn't draw Wailing Doom. So what I looked at is how can I extend that kind of end game, and what I've actually gone for is double Infinity Circuit with the double Reclaim the Stars. And a lot of people might be thinking, well, that's more of a kind of control combo. Yeah, but actually I figured that if I'm running out of cards and I'm running out of maintaining that tempo, that these are actual massive tempo plays, right? Because Reclaim the Stars giving you 5 cards, most of them discounted to 0 cost, is I mean, that's got to be the best tempo play in the game, hasn't it? And so that's worked really well. I've kept the Crimson Hunters in, and then I've added a Wave Serpent, and I think the Wave Serpent is low-key a little bit unexplored in the game. I actually think it's not a bad card. You've got to find the right time to play it, but it's a 7 health flyer, so first of all, pretty durable, pretty difficult to take out with anything that's not hard removal, and what that gives you as well is essentially double your hero power. It gives you 2 Storm Guardians for 2 mana, so if you are running out of cards, just getting this every turn and being able to plop down another 2 Guardians, which obviously lead the 2 Spirit Stones, is just super, super powerful. So I'm actually really liking this end game, and it's working really, really well for me. I've got to say, this deck is, if you mulligan correctly, it's really powerful, and it's arguably actually A tier, but I'm going to put it as B tier. If you don't want to run that though, if you don't want the Infinity Circuit and the Reclaim the Stars package, as I said, you can replace that. Other people have put Hemlocks in, they've put in like some 3-drops, and you can more than welcome to do that, and that'll work just as well for you. So that's Ghaelyn. Now the next B tier deck that we've got is Shumatsu Nids. Now Tyranids are in an interesting spot because Tyranids were just getting quite powerful towards the end of the last meta, and they were figuring some things out. You probably saw the Stealth Nids, which I've got a video on, so if you want to go and watch that. You could replace Shumatsu Nids with Stealth Nids. I think Stealth Nids would be potentially B tier, but I kind of wanted to just put one of the Nids versions in, and I do think that Shumatsu Nids, as I'm calling it, is slightly better. I think he calls them big, what's he call it? Big Nids or something he calls them, I don't know. But let's have a look at this deck because it's kind of interesting. So now, again, it's a little bit draw dependent. you've got to know what you're doing with the mulliganing, and you've got to know what you're doing with this deck. But if you play it right, like Shumatsu, he made the top 10 last season, and he's in the top 10 this season. So this deck can play well into it. However, it does struggle with orks, and that's one of the problems. Right now, the orks are prevalent, and that's what's holding this back. If it wasn't for orks, this deck would be higher and even more powerful. But one of the things that this deck does well is that early on, you've got things like the infinite biomorphologies. Now, you don't have to have this card, but you know, I know Shumatsu kind of says like when you get this off you kind of win, because it's just too powerful with what's coming anyway, being all these larger beasts, and then all of a sudden receiving this kind of unfair buff is just tips them over the edge. So obviously we're trying to get units to stick. We can play things like the warrior early, we can play things like the double node beast on turn 4. One of the things that's really key with this deck, guys, is you need level 20 on the Forge. And this is one of the reasons I've not played it too much, because I'm only level 18 on the Forge at the minute. I'm desperately trying to get to level 20. And that's because you get the digestion pool. And the digestion pool is insane. It basically allows you to play your first unit that you play in the game gets a discount of 2. So what I've seen Shumatsu do is often not even drop a unit till turn 4, but then he'll like drop a hive crone on turn 4, so it'll come on, deal 3 damage and kill one of the early minions that are on the board, and all of a sudden he's got a 7 health flyer on the board on turn 4, you know. So really powerful player. And then from there, obviously once we start to get past like turn 6 with this deck, it starts to get super powerful, because we've got big units that are coming down that are bigger statted than other, you know, peer units, if you like, of the same amount of energy in other factions. These are bigger units. You know, you've got things like Screamer Killer, which have blasts, so they do really well against orcs and things like that, killing off Grokks. Armored up, Carnifex is armored up, and they're just really difficult to take down. And obviously some of our spells, we can use things like stealth, and then we draw the big finisher, which is you know, either Adrenal Surge, which gives +2 melee and range. Obviously we're going to slap that on a synapse creature that sticks between, so we're essentially giving Adrenal Surge to 3 units, and that can be enough to win the game. But if not, we've got the Ravenous Hunter, and this combination is insane, because again, you put it on a synapse creature, we all get +1 attack. That's 3 units getting +1 attack that can all now attack twice. Oh, by the way, that includes your Warlord, right? So you know, you can do over 40 damage with this combo. I've done a video, if you want to check my videos out, I've actually got a deck guide on the stealth Tyranids, and one of the games we do over 40 damage in one turn. So it's an insane combination. So yeah, really fun deck to play. It might just be a little bit frustrating if you draw into lots of orcs with removal. Not all orcs run the removals, but things like No Mucking About, things like Will of God, they ignore all the stealth cards. They just destroy the units. So that's something to be mindful of. Okay, so that is the B tier currently. So moving into the C tier. So first of all, we have the mid-range Chaos. Now, this deck is essentially, I've got PSJ's deck here, and you know, since Abaddon has obviously received a buff, now he can do something on turn 1. He can actually heal himself. And that's not bad. That's not bad, because it does mean that he can play a little bit later into the game, and it gives him something to do. I don't think it's phenomenal yet, but this deck does seem to me to be one of the better Chaos decks that I've seen. It's got good early game. It's a mid-range build. It's trying to stick on board. That's the key with this deck. So we've got everything from 2 drops up, where we're trying to basically get units to stick. Now we've got things like Traitor's Hate to get us back into the game, you know, so to deal 2 damage to all units. We've got things like Spawned, so if orcs play like the Green Horde, they've actually in Chaos got one of the better counters, I think, to orcs in things like Spawned, Traitor's Hate, and even more so if you've managed to get oh no, I was on about a 5 drop that we don't run in here. But yeah, so you've got some good counters there, though, to the orcs there. The new Noise Marine is utterly insane. This card can win you games. If they haven't got an answer to this card, I had this card up to like 20 damage at one point, because every time your Warlord takes damage, it gains a Dark Pack of Excess, and a Dark Pack of Excess gives +2 to melee and range. So you can imagine how insanely big that card can get. And then if things do die, then the Plague Marines get the buff, because they get a Dark Pack of Resilience, which gives +2 health. No, +1 health and regeneration for every time a friendly troop dies. So this deck's pretty good because it's designed in a way that units tend to stick, and it's easier to play out because you're sort of playing on tempo, on curve every time. And then towards the end of the curve, you've not only got things like the Bloodthirst unit now, which is a massive buff, I think, but you've also got things like the Master of Possession and the Dark Apostle, which essentially keep giving you spells, so it kind of extends your hand as well. So yeah, this is a really cool deck. If you're looking to play some chaos, then I would probably recommend at this stage this one. People are still experimenting, so that could change, but this is not a bad place to start with chaos right now. And last but not least, in C tier we have vehicle control. So the poor old Ultramarines, you probably don't have any sympathy if you played pre-season, because they were so dominant and they were just killing us. Their Warlords are still brilliant. Their abilities haven't changed. The Warlords are fantastic. However, they did get... there's no other way to put this. They got absolutely smashed with the nerf hammer. So many of their units got hit. However, this deck is... coming to us from Mr. Midnight, I think, who built this, and it's pretty good. You know, this is, if you're looking to play Marines, some people have asked me, BJ, what do we do? You know, we got nerfed to High Heaven, what are we supposed to do with the Ultramarines? Well, this isn't a bad idea. You can use Marneus Calgar, or you can use Togeris and do the same thing, but Togeris is pretty good because he allows you to draw a spell from your deck, and the reason why that's important is we really want battlefield supremacy, right? Because if we can get this off, especially early, it lowers the cost of all vehicles in our hand and deck by 1, and then we get to actually draw one of those vehicles as well. So super powerful. And what you can see here is it's still got some of the old spirit from some of the old meta, you know, Marine decks, the codexes, the tactical insights, cheating out double codex. But built in with that, what we've got now is this vehicle package. So as we've already talked about with the battlefield supremacy, we've now got the 7th Company Bites to give us some more early game. We've got Cronus, who I think is actually really growing on me. I think he's actually a fantastic legendary card, this guy. Giving flank, I mean, if this guy hits the board, your opponent should be trying to do everything they can to kill this guy, because if not, vehicles are coming on with flank, and not only that, he gives you what's this called, the Spear of Macragge, so we can then give that vehicle +2 armor and Vanguard. Wow, that can win the game. That can win the game alone. I've even put that on the 7th Company bike and it's become a problem. So he's a key card. What we've also got is you know, we replace some of the things like this, then we put this in the deck because it's a good statted card. It's a basic card as well, so everyone's got this. It's a good statted card for 4 energy, and it's a vehicle, and that's the important piece. It's a vehicle, so they're in the deck. We're now running the Apothecary Polixis, which I think is also pretty good because the heal is quite needed, and in addition, the stats make this, I think, probably the better 5-drop now, because the other 5-drops got hit, like this got nerfed first of all, and then the stun guy got nerfed, but we are still running this. You know, we have got double tactical insight, so we're running that in there. And then what we'd bring in is the more powerful endgame, so obviously the 2 Redemptor Dreadnoughts, that can now be played potentially on turn 6, because if you use the battlefield supremacy, making it only cost 7 instead of 8, and then if you were going second, you've got the stratagem that basically allows you to, for 0 mana, play something for 1 less cost. So you could get that out for 6, and for the similarly, you could get the Executioner out for 8. So you know, these are fantastic late game cards. Some of the better late game actual units in the game. So this is so well done to to Mr. Midnight. Done well here pulling this together. And if you are still looking to play some Ultramarines after the nerfs, then I would say something like this is probably the best bet to go ahead and start with. So there we got it, guys. Everything from S down to C tier. Hope you like that. Hope you found it useful. Please, like I said earlier, please consider subscribing to the channel. Yeah, we're going to do lots more Warpforge content, so don't want you to miss out. I'm also going to start streaming some stuff on YouTube as well, so if you subscribe, then that'll go live as well and get to see some top 50 ladder gameplay. But I hope you found that useful. As I say, the meta is very early. It will change, and I'll be back with another meta report soon. Until then, take care.